A Gulf War veteran who moved to Colorado last year has had his children confiscated by the state of Kansas over his use of marijuana. Now, this is 40-year-old Raymond Schwab, and he relied on medical marijuana to treat PTSD after he suffered severe side effects from medicines that were prescribed to him by the VA. Now, the Department of Veterans Affairs prescribes Schwab with an assortment of medicines like they tend to do, including anti-anxiety drugs, muscle relaxants, and pain medicines. But he said they did not work well for him. In fact, they made his condition a lot worse. And so he found that it was medical marijuana that was the only thing that helped. And in fact, now that is the only thing that he relies on to treat his pain as well as his PTSD. Well, 9 months ago, he and his wife planned to move to Colorado in order to start growing medicinal marijuana to help other veterans. And right as they were preparing for this move, the state of Kansas took 5 of their children, ages 5 to 16, into custody on suspicion of child endangerment. So it's been 9 months now. A judge declared that the claims of child endangerment were unsubstantiated, but the children have not been returned to the Schwabs, and they're now asking how the state is able to keep their kids and keep them in custody even after the charges against them have been dismissed. So joining me now are Raymond and Amelia Schwab from the steps of the Capitol building there in Kansas. Now, talk to me a little bit about this federal lawsuit that's just recently been filed. I know that was actually what compelled you to end a 17-day hunger strike. So where do we stand now with this case?
Right. Well, the reason I ended, as you said, is because one of my conditions to end was a higher authority to step in. So an attorney out of California named Matthew Pappas flew out here and helped me initially file it pro se. We've added close to 27 or more defendants to the complaint. We just recently found out that the federal court is allowing us to file. And the amazing thing is, because it's pro se, all of these individuals are going to be served by U.S. Marshals. I would love to be able to see their faces when they get those documents. But yeah, we're just pushing forward. Matthew is trying to get aligned with the attorney we have that's local, because that way he can come into the lawsuit, but eventually he's going to fully take it over. And we're definitely seeking full accountability under the law for what they've done to my family.
Right, and you're definitely not the exception here. You have been, a lot of families have actually been coming out of the woodwork, people who are afraid to speak out because of the bullying, because they have other children at home, that they're afraid if they do speak out that perhaps the child family services is going to come in and take the other kids out of the home, so they're just quiet and allow themselves to be bullied by this system that is destroying families. Now, I know that you guys are, one of the things that is making this such a big impact here with this case is that you were kind of dealing with the state line. So in Colorado, where you are living, where you were about to move to, marijuana is legalized there, even for recreational use, but you all were using it there medically. And then, of course, in Kansas, they said, well, we don't agree with that here. And so just in the instance of this state, just to note how the tensions are really high between these neighboring states with Colorado, sheriffs from Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Kansas all filed a lawsuit against the state of Colorado for these marijuana laws. They cite trafficking concerns. So it's almost as if they're using you as an example to let Colorado and other states that would pass this legislation know that, well, we have the power here, and we're going to hold our thumb down on these families that would dare not follow their rules.
Yeah, and I said the same thing from the beginning. When I got a copy of the police report, they had a snapshot from my Facebook where I said that we were moving back home to get involved in a dispensary and start working with veterans, help get them off medication through the use of cannabis oil, because we have record numbers of veterans overdosing on prescription drugs. And so they actually snapshotted that and put it in the file as part of the reason why they were taking our kids. And you know, as we've traveled back and forth, we've had car rental agencies say that we have to be careful because they're actually targeting any kind of fleet Colorado license plates when they cross the border. And even since we've been here on the Capitol, you know, I've been to a congressional or a committee hearing here against a really bad bill they were trying to pass, a hemp oil bill they called it. And the facts and statistics they give concerning cannabis are complete. It's like watching an episode of Reefer Madness. Some of the things they're saying, it's crazy. I mean, it's total propaganda.
Right. Well, they're absolutely ignorant to its beneficial uses, and especially with veterans, because they're not actually doing any long-term studies on the benefits of medicinal marijuana. Meanwhile, they'll put the veterans on 30 different type of psychotropic drugs that are probably going to have a lot of adverse reactions with each other, and that's completely fine. These prescription drugs that actually kill more people than heroin or cocaine or something, if you were just to buy the drug right off the street, you'd have a better chance of surviving than you would if you got put on these legal prescriptions. So that's why I find it so infuriating. But something else that's going on here with this case, which many families are actually dealing with, is this Kids for Cash. Now, you mentioned earlier when we spoke on the phone that Kansas was actually one of the first states, or this might have been Nico, but was one of the first states that actually privatized this idea of getting money from taking kids from their families and then fostering them out. So talk to me a little bit about what's happening in your case.
Well, what's ironic is I believe that privatization was the result of an ACLU lawsuit because Kansas was doing a poor job and kids were dying and being abused. So that was like a penalty. But then these businesses came in, like we have one here, it's called St. Francis. They have a hospital where they report parents and kidnapped children. They have an adoption agency, and they also have volunteer caseworkers that are called children's advocates that actually work with the children. So they're involved from A to Z of this child kidnapping and then selling them out. If you go to their websites and DCF websites for Kansas, it's almost like looking at a puppy shopping bazaar online, because they have these kids with these little bios and they're smiling and how great they would be to be adopted out. It's really sad and disgusting, because as we've had people come up here and just share their cases, it's just happening over and over and over. And I believe last year, and I'm not sure if this is a completely accurate statistic, but Kansas made something like 17.5 million, that's just the state, in federal bonuses for placing kids outside of their kinship structure. But that doesn't include the social work or the private social workers or the case managers or the psychologists that put these kids on drugs, or the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, the tentacles just stretch all over the place.
Right, and they're putting it out there as this great thing that they're doing by saving all of these children. Meanwhile, there's another case where a child was known, there was absolute signs of abuse, and this child actually, a 4-year-old, ended up dying because neglected. And so you're seeing in a lot of these instances that they're taking children that are quote unquote more adoptable or more, easier to foster, whereas the other maybe trouble kids, the trouble cases, they just kind of look away, ignore them, and then they end up being killed. This happens all the time. Just to put up on the screen for people to see how much they're making. They're getting bonuses. They get a referral rate, almost $4,000 there in referrals, just, something like that. If they, $5,000 if they place them somewhere, $7,500 for children 9 to 13, $10,000 per placement for children 14 and older. So this is a huge racket. I mean, they are making money, and especially when you consider kids that get lost in the system, so they're not adopted out, they're just locked up in the system constantly. People make their entire year's revenue off of fostering children.
They do, and I think my wife would know more about this. How much is it for a Native American child that you heard? You don't remember? I think it was something like $25,000 if it's a Native American child, because they're under a different federal structure, but if the tribe doesn't step in, they actually get more money for destroying Indian families. Now, I haven't 100% verified that, but it's consistent with the pattern that we've seen, that, they have high value targets that they go after. And if they don't have, like damaged kids that are on medication, then they make them damaged and put them on medication. My son is currently in a psychiatric institute. He is not mentally ill. They did it because my wife refused to authorize them putting him on basically legal methamphetamine.
They even had the children believe that I was like in a hospital because I was sick when they were first taken.
Because my daughter was like, "Are you okay, Mom? Are you well?" And my wife was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." We heard her say to someone, "Okay, my mom's better. I'm going home now." It's just
And
sad.
they said that it was just a good way to explain to a young child.
Yeah, that she's sick, and that's why she's not coming for you, really. So what sort of thing has been happening with your children that you're aware of? Because I understand you've only been able to see them twice in the last more than a year now?
No, it's been more than that, about 6 times.
Okay.
But not a lot. You know, we have to travel 600 miles to do it, and it costs a lot of money to travel and stay here. Plus, they were just doing all these intrusions into our privacy to try to force us into complying with them or not see our kids.
And then the kids would show up late, and they wouldn't rearrange it so that we could still have our time. They just cut it short.
Yeah, one visit, they were 45 minutes late. We got 15 minutes with our daughter, which broke her heart. You know, she was like, "Where are you going, Mom and Dad? I just got here." And they were like, "Well, we'll make it up next time." We were like, "We just drove 600 miles. You know, you're not helping us pay for this." So, but we are having a visit on Tuesday. My son gets to come for the first time in a year. They've been retaliating against him for testifying on our behalf that the allegations were false. Couldn't even get a supervised phone call with them. And now he finally gets a visit, but that's why he's joined our federal lawsuit, because of what they've put him through.
And so just tell me a little bit briefly what sort of hoops they wanted you all to jump through so families can understand, because a lot of times what happens is, you know, if you've got nothing to hide, you're just going to open your door to Child Protective Services, not understanding that they are building a case against you from the very minute that they step across that threshold. And so then, in order to appear as if they're complying with you, we're going to give you your kids back, they say, but we just need you to do all this first. So you guys are in Colorado, and you're having to do all this stuff to comply with Kansas state law. So just give us briefly a little bit of a...
Sure.
They really set you up for failure, I think. I had 23 things just on my case plan alone. They knew that I didn't have a vehicle. My husband was working in Denver, and I didn't have a vehicle, or we didn't get service up at where we live, so it was really impossible for me to do the things that they were asking to do, for one. But when you're so overwhelmed with grief because you just lost your children, that's really overwhelming to see that you have to do so many things. But even when you do them, they don't care. They're not going to give them back anyway.
And they'll twist them, because you have to do, like, they asked us to do mental health evaluations, drug and alcohol evaluations, parenting class. Because I'm a man, I had to do a domestic violence abuser intervention course, which I protested. I didn't even have domestic violence mentioned in this case. So it was just nutty, all the things they were just putting on us. But see, people, all those classes get paid, the mental health people get paid, but then they're doing worse things, because we've met people this has happened to. You'll do the mental health evaluation, they'll say, well, we think you're bipolar, so you're going to have to take this medication. And if you refuse, they'll say you're not complying with your plan, and they will try to terminate your rights. So they're actually force medicating parents and children, which y'all know about psychotropics, how terrible.